All right, Buffalo Bills fans, welcome to this episode of The Walkthrough. I'm your host, Anthony Marino. Happy to be here with you once again, talking everything Buffalo Bills, and of course, happy to be part of the Overreaction Sports Network. You know, each and every week, our show is brought to you by our friends at FanDuel. Usually around this time of the show, I'll share some of the spreads courtesy of FanDuel for football games coming up. And here we are, football season is officially over. The Super Bowl being last week, and the Seattle Seahawks defeating the New England Patriots. Recording this on Saturday, so for whenever you catch this, happy Valentine's Day to you and yours. If that's something you celebrate or you enjoy, good for you. For us, right, you want to plan kind of a year from now. Valentine's Day is going to be Super Bowl Sunday, and I believe it's also President's Day weekend. So, you know, kind of when you think of that, for all this and for everybody that's kind of moving slow or was moving slow, the Monday morning after the Super Bowl looks like that might be a holiday for many, at least for the kids in school. But yeah, plan accordingly out there, everybody. Next year, a year from now, Valentine's Day and Super Bowl Sunday falling on the same day. So listen, we're in off-season mode here at the Overreaction Sports Network. Got off to a little bit of a later start than we would have, thanks to the firing of head coach Sean McDermott, the hiring of Joe Brady, kind of a lot of news around the new coaching staff and filling a lot of those vacancies. The Bills made a lot of those announcements yesterday. Official is Joe Brady filling out his staff. Probably the one that caught most of your eye, former head coach John Fox, named a special assistant to the team. So, when you're a first-time head coach, a younger head coach, I think to have someone on the sideline with you that has had head coaching experience, been through a lot of those situations before, it's always a good situation to have someone with that type of experience when it comes to the day-to-day. So John Fox joining the coaching staff with the Bills. And again, you can see that at buffalobills.com. Plenty of other spaces running through the 20 coaches that were named in Friday's press release. With this, like I said, football season is over. Today, we're going to talk about some of those key offseason dates. I want to talk a little bit about Dalton Kincaid, too, because the Bills are going to have to make a decision on a fifth-year option for him. And I wasn't really thinking about it too much. And then it was earlier in the week, Joe Miller hosted this week's edition of On the Beat with Tim Graham from The Athletic. And they were talking a bit about Dalton Kincaid. So I'll get to you with that in just a bit. Speaking of Tim Graham, though, something that I was excited about, and I get it, it's just for a 2-week time period right now, and maybe it's a little test run. But you've probably heard WGR is no longer going to be the flagship station for the Buffalo Bills and their broadcasts, which means that One Bills Live is no longer on WGR and kind of leaving that hole in the schedule from 1 to 3 p.m. in the afternoon. So for the next 2 weeks, Brad Ryder will be coming back to WGR and co-hosting during that time with Tim Graham. And I'm excited that, even if it's just for a 2-week period, I'm hoping it will be something longer term because I've always really appreciated Tim's work and what he's done, certainly Brad's too. But Tim, I think, brings, an interesting perspective to just everything that is the Bills, to the Buffalo landscape of sports. If you listen to Tim Graham and Friends, his podcast that he does with Jonah Bronstein, I enjoy that each and every time when it comes back. And Tim doesn't really hold back. So, I think when you look at this, if it's just for 2 weeks, I think that's, will be something to enjoy. If it's something longer than that, something to look forward to as well. But again, go back and listen to the episode from earlier this week. That was before the news broke around him doing these 2 weeks with WGR. But again, Tim Graham was on with our Joe Miller talking about a number of things in Dalton Kincaid, which I'll get to in just a bit. But before I jump into that topic and we talk about some of the things for the offseason, need to give a big shout out to our friends at Anchor Bar. Anchor Bar, right? The home of the original chicken wing, and it's a great place to watch all your favorite sports events. Yes, football is done for now, but maybe you want to catch NBA All-Star Weekend, some college basketball. The Olympics are going on right now. I forgot to mention that before too. So, plenty that you can head over to Anchor Bar, find a location near you, go to anchorbar.com. You can find all their locations. There's info on online ordering. You can pull up the menus if you want to plan in advance for what you're looking to get. And they've got plenty of options, right? in addition to some great wings that they do have 24 different sauces and rubs. There's plenty of appetizers, chicken tenders, pizza, beef on wick, burgers, sandwiches, salads, you name it. They got 16 locations, 3 new spots in Tucson, Arizona, Frisco, Texas, and Raleigh, North Carolina. And my weekly reminder, Anchor Bar. We need to get you here in Albany, New York. So thanks again for supporting not just the walkthrough, but all the shows that we do here at the Overreaction Sports Network. And speaking of that, if you haven't done so yet, make sure you like, make sure you comment, make sure you subscribe so you get this show every week. You hear from Joe Miller, John Fina, Jerry Ostrowski, Zig Fracassi, Dan Freddy. You know, we've got you covered. We're going strong throughout the offseason, and there's plenty to talk about, right? And kind of as we get to that now, you get into that offseason mode, and this is going to be a different one for the Buffalo Bills. A lot of players that are free agents that we talked about in last week's show. But another question that kind of pops up is around Dalton Kincaid, right? Former Buffalo Bills first-round draft pick, finished his 3rd season with the Bills, and they've got to make a decision by May 1st if they are going to, pick up the 5th-year option for him. From comments that have been made by Brandon Beane before, it seems like a little bit of a foregone conclusion that it's something that they are going to do. But going back to that show earlier this week, right, when Joe and Tim were talking, Joe was very much like, what do you mean they're going to pick up the 5th-year option, right? Like, I think it's too soon to make that type of a decision based on the injuries that Dalton Kincaid has had over these past couple of seasons. And, I had to pause for a second because at least for myself, I kind of looked at it and said, okay, it's going to cost under $9 million to keep Dalton Kincaid. You can look at the splits of how productive Josh Allen is and the offense, when he's on the field versus those games when he's not and he misses time with some of those injuries. Like, he is certainly, him and Khalil Shakir, like the 2 most reliable pass catching options that the Buffalo Bills have. Now, the problem is Joe notes, right? But the injury piece and managing and working through that continues to be an issue. And, you can look at Kincaid, and even just from a snap count standpoint, right? Played about 63% of the snaps during his rookie season, had to miss a few games during his sophomore year, down to 57% of the snaps. Then this season, misses a handful of games as well, only playing 38% of the snaps. And that's where I think the question comes in for folks. Similar, and I don't want to speak for Joe, right? But I'm just listening back to that episode earlier this week. And you think to yourself, like, okay, I get it where there could be some pause. Now, to me, it's more about the price tag, right? With it being under $9 million. And Joe Marino from Locked On Bills says, shoot, $8-9 million is what a good blocking tight end gets right now. So when it comes to Dalton Kincaid and what he can bring to the Buffalo Bills offense, here is a guy that is, proven that he can play at a high level, not consistently the way everyone would like to see it. Again, I think a lot of that ties in more to the injuries, but we've certainly seen those flashes, right? A couple games where he goes over 100 yards this season, in my opinion, where I think, gosh, I'd like to see the Buffalo Bills pass the ball to him more. But when you're managing through injuries, now dealing with the PCL, only playing 38% of the snaps, that is something that is going to continue to be a conversation, at least for how productive he can be. And there's so much conversation around pass catchers in the Bills, right? The wide receiver conversation is going to be going hot and heavy this offseason. And I guess you could say around tight ends too, because of Kincaid and the 5th-year option, and certainly what the Bills are going to do around Dawson Knox and the $17 million cap hit that he has right now. Is that someone they're going to move on from? Are they going to look to restructure to lower that number? Personally, I think that's what I'd like to see them do, right? Some kind of a restructure, give him a bit of a contract extension. They can lower that number, I believe, by like $9 million this season. That would certainly open up some valuable cap space for the Bills. But again, they're going to have to make this decision on Dalton Kincaid, and they've got to make it by May 1st. So, I don't think anything too crazy is going to happen, between now and then. He's not having surgery on the PCL, right? It's one of those things that just with rest and you give the opportunity to heal itself. But for Kincaid, like, okay, he's a valuable piece to the Bills offense. And at $9 million, right, that puts you in the neighborhood of the annual average salary for Curtis Samuel. It's less than like a Josh Palmer makes, right? So by comparison to what you pay wide receivers, and even now, like, you can talk about free agents and, oh, well, now Alec Pierce is going to be the top free agent wide receiver on the market and getting $25 million a year. All right, man, I think he's got some nice potential. I think he flashed last season, certainly. But when you think about how you can invest $25 million, I don't know if that's the direction to go. And I don't want to get into everything with other free agents right now or draft strategy or whatnot, but the cost of free agent wide receivers is kind of nutty when you think of that, in my opinion, based on what the production is. And you can see when you give middling contracts to guys like Josh Palmer and Curtis Samuel, like, listen, no disrespect, but there's a reason why they're going to command $10 million a year. At tight end, it's a little bit different, right? And I think we're still waiting to see that peak for Kincaid. But even if it becomes like, listen, over the next 2 years, you get rookie Dalton Kincaid, where he, has almost 700 yards receiving, and you're thinking to yourself, yeah, this is the player that, the team invested a first-round draft pick in and traded up to get, and becomes that pass-catching, weapon for you. I think the early talk of him being like a Travis Kelce type, like, whoa, pump the brakes here, right? You're talking about one of the like 3 greatest tight ends of all time. To just be that guy, like, hey, can he get you 65 receptions a year and 750 to 800 yards and a handful of touchdowns? Like, listen, for $9 million, to me, that's a no-brainer. But I understand why some people would think differently. And listen, do me a favor. In the comments right now, let me know. Are you team like, yeah, you should give him the 5th-year contract extension, or it's not something that you would touch? Because that at least gives me an idea of where everybody that's watching this right now kind of falls in. I did throw something up on Twitter, and it's definitely early, right? I didn't think to do it far enough in advance. I mean, have about 40 responses so far. So it's not a huge, sample size, but it's also not like, me and 4 other people. Right now, about 87% of folks are saying yes, give them the 5th-year option, with around 12% saying no. Honestly, I thought this was going to be a little bit closer to like I don't want to say a 50-50, but maybe like a 60-40, 65-35 split. So it is early. We'll see how that kind of plays out. And, as that kind of advances, maybe I'll throw that in the comments section as well, so everybody can take a look at it. And if you want to weigh in on Twitter, but like I said, hit it up in the comments section now, because I think that's something that would certainly be helpful. But for me, Dalton Kincaid, lock him up with the 5th-year option. Again, that's not for this coming season. And I think, for some, they might be like, wait, what about the salary cap? The work that the Bills have to do around the salary cap, Dalton Kincaid's 5th-year option being picked up, that's for the 2027 season. So that has no impact on this season right now, what the Bills need to do to be cap compliant. And again, there will be plenty of conversation around that as it comes to, do you do a simple restructure with Josh Allen or Spencer Brown or Ed Oliver, some of those pieces that can truly free up some money right away. But again, a lot of other conversations out there. One other conversation that's been out there a lot this week as well, and I think it picked up some weird steam just because, again, it's the off season. You need something to talk about. You look at, what type of moves can the team potentially make. And our buddy, Matt Perino from the Shout Buffalo podcast, had talked, and he was part of a roundtable and says, is this the year that the Bills trade Dion Dawkins away? And, that clip went viral a bit. I saw that Dion, kind of commented on it with a few emojis on Instagram when I had certainly seen that. Our own Jerry Ostrowski took to Twitter to let people know that is an insane, thing to even consider for the Bills based on the play of Dion Dawkins and the level that he still plays at, even though there were, again, maybe a little bit of a regression this past season. So that's another conversation that will continue to be out there. I don't look at it, any way of moving on from Dion Dawkins does not do anything to free up cap space for the Bills. It would just be kind of to gain additional draft capital. So, to me, I think it's just one of those parts of the offseason. Listen, we talk about different things. We throw different things out there, and that one took off just a little bit. But, I think that conversation will certainly certainly consider to continue for the coming week. So there will be a lot of things, and and with that too, I wanted to talk to you all about some dates that are out there, right? Because I think when you get to this point of the off season, it's like, okay, there's a lot of things for us to keep in mind. I'll be honest, I always enjoy this time of season a bit, maybe a little more than I should, but that opportunity to look forward to the draft and talk about free agency and see what the roster is going to look like. I mean, yeah, maybe I enjoyed it much more in the past when the Bills were in the drought, because you always needed that sense of hope and something to look forward to. But for right now, okay, new coaching staff in place. Let's see what that's going to look like and what kind of moves are made for the Buffalo Bills. So when we talk about the offseason schedule, here's a few dates that I think everybody should definitely keep in mind. First one coming up this week, February 17th, is the first day to designate the franchise and transition tags. For the Bills, I don't think there's anyone that falls into that category, right? If they're going to look to do an extension or re-sign, sorry, not an extension. If they're going to look to re-sign Connor McGovern or David Edwards, those are really the two at the top of the list, right? We talked about the free agents last week. Like, I don't think Joey Bosa's coming back. You're certainly not giving him the franchise tag for what those numbers would be for Edwards or McGovern. Again, they don't have the cap flexibility. It would need to be, signing a new multi-year contract to be able to spread out some of those dollars. And I just don't see that as something that works for the Bills, but who knows? And a lot of times as you start to look at this, right, and again, that February 17th date, you start to see what's happening with different teams. That could have an impact on other free agents that are out there and what that is going to look like. So, things could start to pick up, at least in the news cycle later this week. Things certainly start to pick up around the scouting combine in Indianapolis, and that is February 23rd through March 2nd. So that is coming in less than 2 weeks, right, as everybody kind of gathers in Indianapolis when it comes to head coaches, general managers, player personnel, scouts, media all come together. And right, there's some late nights in the streets of Indianapolis that people are kind of around. And that's when the rumor mill, in my opinion, kind of goes full tilt, right? There will be certain things that come out about players that, maybe are looking to be traded, some inklings of who might be interested in who when it comes to free agency. And of course, plenty around the draft as well. The workout piece, to me is so overblown now, like the 40-yard dash and the bench press and, the 3-cone drill and all those things. Like, that's fine. At the end of the day, right, it comes down to the medicals, which I think are certainly key for the teams to, make sure they're able to do their evaluations and see who's healthy and not, and to a lesser extent, the interviews. And I think one thing that will be interesting with the interviews, and I think, Tyler Dunn from Go Long TD has talked about this in the past. And under Sean McDermott, there's really been this camaraderie. Like, I don't want to say that everybody on the team is a choir boy, but, they've really avoided players that maybe have that edge, right? And in certain ways, like, okay, you had Stephon Diggs. He comes to the club. He's on his best behavior. I get all of that. But then as things start to turn, like, you can only have a couple of guys that have that type of edge on your roster. Was that a Sean McDermott thing? Was that a Brandon Beane thing? Was that something that they both believed in? Will some of those players, maybe with a little bit more of a, when I say a character concern, like, I don't mean that in a negative way, but like some guys that might ruffle some feathers in the locker room a little bit, right? You talk about wide receivers, A.J. Brown from the Philadelphia Eagles, and people will say like, I don't know that personality, but like, listen, for a lot of these top wide receivers, they kind of bring some personality to the position. And if you bring in an A.J. Brown and he's going to be on his best behavior for 2 seasons and that helps get you over the top, then listen, man, you've got plenty of leaders in that locker room that, I think they can kind of manage things and what they need to do themselves. So anyway, here I am digressing into, developing the roster. But again, as we kind of go through with that, the combine, February 23rd through March 2nd in Indianapolis. Shortly thereafter, right, March 3rd, so the teams just have a couple of weeks as the deadline for the franchise and transition tag. So that is certainly coming up. Things certainly take off March 9th through 11th. the negotiating period for pending unrestricted free agents, also known as the legal tampering period, and free agency officially starts on March 11th at 4 p.m. So right from the 9th through the 11th, there's going to be plenty out there, plenty of announcements taking place, but it's not until 4 p.m. on the 11th that guys can actually sign on the dotted line. Another piece, the annual league meetings in Phoenix, that's March 29th through April 2nd. Again, you usually get plenty of buzz coming out of those meetings. Not as exciting as what comes out around the combine, but it's certainly there. In addition to that, deadline for restricted free agents to sign their offer sheets, April 17th. Ryan Vandermark and Alec Anderson, two guys to keep an eye on, or restricted free agents for the Bills. Their restricted free agent tag number is like $3.3 million. Is that something the team will look to do? Do they look to sign them to just a regular deal before then? That is certainly something to keep an eye on. And then the last date, here, the NFL draft, April 23rd through the 25th. It is in Pittsburgh this year. So I do wonder what kind of representation Bills Mafia will have. I get it sometimes, not as exciting when you're picking at number 26, right? Like late in the first round. But along those lines, a relatively easy trip for members of Bills Mafia to make it to Pittsburgh for the draft coming up. So, there's plenty to look forward to. And again, you talk around, everything with Dalton Kincaid. I see that the tight end position as a whole, right? Like Dawson Knox ties into that as well. It will be interesting. But again, for me, I see the Bills picking up that fifth-year option, but maybe you fall in a different bucket. Maybe you're like Joe Miller that says, not so fast, my friend. Like, let's pump the brakes here just a little bit before we go handing out that fifth year. So, listen, I appreciate you guys tuning in each and every week. It is fun to be here with you and to continue talking Buffalo Bills. As I said before, make sure you comment, make sure you like, make sure you subscribe, and share this wherever if you're watching on YouTube, wherever you download your podcast, if it's Apple Podcasts, Spotify, whatever it may be, make sure that you're sharing all the great work that we're doing here at the Overreaction Sports Network. We appreciate you guys. Thanks for tuning in. Go Bills, and I'll see you all next week. Take care.